Hello and welcome to our discussion of terminal aerodrome forecasts. In this video, we're just going to look at the overview of TAFs. Generally, what is a TAF? TAF is, of course, a forecast of conditions at an airport for specific times into the future. TAFs were implemented back in July of 1996. Before that, we had the old FT code. TAF is a European, actually French. It was developed in France way back when, and it is the ICAO standard. In 1996, the United States decided to standardize our forecast for airports, so we accepted the TAF code. TAFs are made for several airports across the United States, over 500 nationally, and the way they decide where forecasts are made or TAFs are made, it comes down from the National Weather Service headquarters in Washington, D.C. Of course, the National Weather Service only has a set amount of resources, in other words, bodies or people that they can hire to forecast. So the more terminal forecasts they have to produce, the more bodies they need. So it comes down to airports that have a lot of air traffic, typically commercial operations, will get terminal forecasts. As a matter of fact, about 6 or 7 years ago, we got TAFs for Devil's Lake and also Thief River Falls, since they had air traffic, commercial air traffic. But at other airports where there are no TAFs, but there is commercial traffic, a lot of times the commercial operator going into and out of the airport will hire a company to do their own TAFs. One company that does that calls their proprietary TAFs RAM TAFs. And the reason I bring that up is because I had a friend who went through initial training for an airline, and they asked him, what is a RAM TAF? Basically, a RAM TAF is just a commercial TAF. It's somebody who makes TAFs for hire, for pay. So here are all the TAFs that are made across the United States, at least the western United States, by the National Weather Service. In North Dakota, of course, you can see Grand Forks, Fargo, Jamestown, Bismarck, Minot, Devil's Lake is now made also. This is an old graphic. But also Williston and Dickinson all have TAFs. Here's the eastern United States and all the TAFs that are made at each airport. TAFs are made by the local Weather Service Forecast Office. In Grand Forks, of course, we have a WFO, and they make TAFs 4 times a day for airports in Grand Forks, Fargo, Bemidji, and also Devil's Lake. And just like METARs, there are standards on how to make a TAF. And I provided here 2 resources that you can use. You can go out and take a look at if you like. It's WSOM D31, Weather Service Operations Manual, and NWS Instruction 10-813. Basically, they give you the guidance or the philosophy as far as how a TAF needs to be made, and also the standards. And then in there also, they talk about the criteria for amending TAFs. Generally speaking, the National Weather Service philosophy is that the first 2 to 6 hours of the forecast are the most important parts of the forecast. Of course, forecasts or terminal forecasts are revised every 6 hours. So the National Weather Service wants to get the first 6 hours right. The last 18 hours will be revised, of course, regardless, but you only get one shot at the first 6 hours, and if you get it wrong, then it has to be amended.
Terminal forecasts can only be made at locations that have our hourly weather observations, which means typically, usually an ASOS or an AWOS machine. There may be humans that are augmenting the weather observations. So the elements that need to be measured, of course, are the things that you typically measure with an ASOS or AWOS. If an element is not measured, if the weather machine cannot report wind or cannot report ceiling or visibility or precipitation, they'll tell you in the terminal forecast that amendments are not made for those particular elements.
The TAF forecast is supposed to be representative of the conditions 5 miles around an airport, 5 statute mile radius around the airport. And TAFs are extremely important to pilots because it determines, of course, their alternate requirements, whether they need an alternate airport or not. Also, if you need an alternate, that also determines your fuel load. You have to carry more fuel to get to your alternate. Also, it determines air traffic control delays. When you go down to low IFR conditions, approaches start to suffer. Of course, no-go decisions, VFR and also IFR, are impacted by TAFs. And then also the takeoff and landing safety, specifically with crosswinds, is important. TAFs are a 24-hour forecast. They're issued 4 times a day. I usually commit this to memory because they're so simple to remember, but also it's very important because if you're flying, you always want to know when the next TAF is coming out. And they come out standard sequence 00, 6, 12, and 18 Zulu. And of course, the forecast is a 24-hour forecast, except at international airports, and we'll talk about that later. And in the TAF, they will use contractions that they use in METARs. So you'll see the same weather and obstruction contractions. Also, the TAF is constructed very similar to a METAR, so it's not too hard to understand. So that's your first video on TAFs. The next video will get into the elements of TAFs.